Hey everyone, brand new episode of the David Seaman Hour. This is our election special, and we're going to be talking about other things as well. We're going to be talking about Stephen Hawking and UFOs and NDAA and predator drones and all the things that I'm interested in. Our guest tonight is Matt Staggs, who is the editorial director of disinfo.com and is the host of the Disinfocast on iTunes. And Disinfo is a very popular source of news that the mainstream media is not covering. So how are you tonight, Matt?
Just fine, but I'm a little concerned. Did you say something about Stephen Hawking piloting a drone? Is that right? Did I hear that correctly?
You did. No, that would be awful. What if all these years he's been developing that?
You know, that's the thing about somebody like Hawking. I mean, he has this great, professional public image, and I'm sure he's a wonderful guy, but who knows? Who knows what's really going on with him?
Yeah,
well, I guess a couple of ex-wives know. I think he's had some pretty dramatic breakups.
What if he's totally evil, and there's just no way for us to know because he's,
Well, maybe the way he manifests that is that he has a switch on his voice box that he clicks over to, like, evil tone. It goes from "Hello, David" to "Hello, David."
Oh, God. Well, I think he cheated on one of his wives, right?
Right. But, he's a wealthy, powerful guy and, human being. Human beings have faults, so...
Yeah, man first, smart scientist second, I guess. There's certain urges, and I think he probably read Sex at Dawn. That's probably where that's coming from. But,
Well, I think one of the most impressive things about Stephen Hawking is the fact that he survived for as long as he has with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, which I don't know if you've known anybody that died from that. I've known a couple of people, and it is absolutely brutal. It is a very, very hard thing to deal with because the person is basically watching their body stop working, and yet their mind is still perfectly aware.
Yeah, I would not wish ALS on my most obnoxious Twitter troll or on my worst enemies.
Like Stephen Hawking?
No, Stephen Hawking, does he have a Twitter account?
I don't know. Is he trolling you?
No, he's not.
I bet
yet.
There will be. As soon as this goes online, there's going to be a troll Stephen Hawking's.
I'm going to start trolling him and see what happens with that. I think we need to have, I was talking about this, we need to have like a troll team 6. Like whenever there's a troll out there who's like starting to really disrupt the conversation, there needs to be a crack team of anti-trolls who swoop in and just outnumber that one troll.
I feel that that's the Death Squad. Those guys on Twitter, man. Anytime I have trouble, it's suddenly the Death Squad pops up out of the bushes and starts giving them more trouble than they possibly want in return. So,
Death Squad very well could be the closest thing that America has to a counter troll team.
Yeah.
But
those guys, I think it's great because it's like a really positive gang in some ways. I mean, it's like these guys are, it's the same kind of thing you expect out of a gang is like, don't F with my guy. This is my guy. I've got his back. But they're mostly just peaceful, happy, and helpful people. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Death Squad sounds so extreme, but really it's just a bunch of smart people who like a certain group of comedians and podcasters and, they share, Wikipedia links with each other.
Right.
So it sounds a lot more extreme than it actually is, and I think the Death Squad aspect only comes out when there's an idiot who's provoking them and deserves to be owned, deserves to be put in their place.
Well, I guess that's all of us sometimes. I'm sure I've said some pretty asinine things now and again. I know I have, as a matter of fact. Get me in the wrong mood. Try to keep it positive, though. What about yourself? Do you have a dark side?
Do I have a dark side? I do.
Troll Stephen Hawking?
Yeah, that's what I do in my spare time. I have a second account, and I just troll the shit out of Stephen Hawking. No, that's not what I do. And in terms of a dark side, I don't think so. I mean, it's hard to say, really. I think this is kind of related to a dark side. I was thinking about how, like, just a few days ago, or I guess a week ago, it came to my attention, I guess I consciously realized that I have a crush on somebody in my my circle of friends.
Hey, that's very kind of you, but I'm afraid it happened for quite a long time. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I realized this, and I was thinking about it, and you get to a certain age, and I think that, especially the way my mind thinks, I think my brain is kind of like a computer, and not a really high-tech computer like a MacBook Air. It's more like a line of code, like, what was it called?
TRS-80, maybe?
Well, it's like MS-DOS. That's like my brain. You type in a command, and it'll give you what you need. And
do you remember BASIC? How about BASIC?
Yeah, maybe it's along the lines of BASIC. But I realized that having this crush on somebody, and just having no control over this emerging, and it just emerges, and then it's almost like a virus. It starts off as just a small thing, and then it begins to occupy more and more of your conscious thoughts, and it's very strange. So I don't know how this connects to a dark side, but I think that we all have parts of our minds that we have no control over.
Yeah, the whole dark side, light side thing is really for Star Wars more than anything else. It's an easy and fun way of breaking down very complicated issues. None of us really have a dark side, and only to the extent that we don't want to acknowledge some of our baser impulses and meaner selves. So, but I do think it's kind of fun, but it's easier. Jung called it the shadow side, that we don't want to acknowledge this shadow self that's different from what we consciously present to the world. But, that being the case, it's awfully fun to play around with. And I don't know. Do you think anybody's actually able to fully acknowledge and incorporate their shadow self? I mean, like I said, Jung talks about this a good bit.
Dexter does a pretty good job. I mean, I know he's a fake person, but...
Well, he's a fake person in the sense that he's a literary character, but also the character itself is a fake person.
Right.
He has absolutely no emotion, nothing, He just puts on a great show. Hervey Cleckley, a psychiatrist, credited one of the first studies on sociopathy or psychopathy, whichever you prefer, wrote a book called The Mask of Sanity, which I think pretty much explains what Dexter's all about.
Huh. The Mask of Sanity. Can you explain what the Mask of Sanity is in just kind of a TLDR way?
Basically, that people that are psychopaths, people like Dexter, being an extreme example, people that don't really feel or think the same way that other people do. They don't have any sense of empathy.
Like Mitt Romney.
Yeah, maybe. They have the best of them, and most of them learn to put on a pretend face, like Dexter. He pretends to be a normal person.
Right, he pretends to react to things, but it's a fake reaction. He doesn't really care.
Yeah, he doesn't care. He doesn't have any real feelings, in the way that you and I would. And that entire field is very interesting to study. And speaking of that, you mentioned Romney. There's been more than a few studies that indicate high-power executives and very powerful politicians have a higher percentage of psychopaths among them than other fields. That apparently you have to have some degree of callousness and lack of empathy and selfishness to be able to really succeed in some of these jobs.
Yeah, to be able to lay off thousands of people and then, go home and not think twice about it.
Yeah, John Ronson, who you may probably know from the Men Who Stare at Goats, wrote a book called The Psychopath Test, which I highly recommend as a exploration of this idea. He goes around and interviews all these guys that were diagnosed psychopaths in the first part of the book, and then later goes and interviews like executives and other people that could be psychopaths. He tries to figure out if they're psychopaths. It's a fun book. Ronson's a pretty funny writer. I've had him on as a guest before on my show. But I strongly recommend that as a quick, fun read that'll get you thinking a lot about the people that run the world. Yeah,
speaking of thinking, before we let go of Stephen Hawking, I brought him up because there's this great quote that he is attributed as having said or typed out or whatever. I have noticed even people who claim everything is predestined and that we can do nothing to change it look before they cross the road. And I think that's interesting because it kind of plays into all these pundits trying to predict the election as if it's some predestined thing. And it might just come down to this storm. It might just come down to something like that, a wild card changing everything. We don't know.
One of the things I read today that I found pretty interesting is that there's actually, that the government says no contingency plan if there is a huge disaster on election day. If there's another, God help us, another 9/11 or, some kind of horrific event.
Well, I think in a way that we should not have a contingency plan. I feel like the election should move forward no matter what. That's really the bedrock of our system. And if we set the precedent where you can just delay elections, I feel like the government will always find an excuse to delay it.
I think it's a great point. But let's play devil's advocate first. Take, for instance, something happens to a large portion of the United States that is considered undesirable.
Alien abduction.
Yeah, right, to this or that candidate, maybe the incumbent, that's going to keep those people, that portion of the country, from voting. What do you do then? I mean, let's look at one of the big swing states. Like, is it Ohio? Is that one of the big ones?
Yeah, this year I think Ohio is one of the big ones.
God help us. What if there's some sort of, natural disaster, chemical warfare event, zombie apocalypse, whatever you want to say, happening in Ohio? Do we go on with the election? I mean, wouldn't that also be kind of a game changer? That, by the way, nobody in Ohio could get out to vote because there's, a chemical spill covering the entire state, or, restless, hungry corpses wandering the streets.
Yeah. For some reason, I don't think we're going to have a zombie apocalypse, but I think what could happen within our lifetimes, and I mean, this is just, we're going in a sci-fi mode here, and it probably won't be in our lifetimes, but it could be. A lot of people talk about this thing called the singularity.
Oh, yeah.
Where, and they talk about it in such glowing, optimistic terms, there's going to be this moment where we develop artificial intelligence, and it'll become self-aware, and then it'll change everything. And it's basically going to be like a benevolent version of Siri that's, a billion times smarter than all of the smartest people on the planet and can solve a lot of our problems as a society and for humanity. But I think the way that this thing solves our problems might not be in the way that we want, It might just look at us and look at us in a really cold, algorithmic way and go, okay, they're reproducing at this rate. If they keep doing this, they're going to destroy their environment. They're going to destroy the planet and each other. So to protect them, we need to start killing some of them off, killing off some of the stupider ones. And it'll be just like what we do to wolves and to deer. When there are too many wolves in an area, they issue permits for people to shoot the wolves and kill them to bring the herd back down to a reasonable, or whatever you call it, the pack, back to a reasonable level.
Culling.
Yeah, culling the herd. That's it. Thank you. I'm worried that if we do get to a point where we have artificial intelligences taking care of us, taking care of our society, that they might start to think in that direction,
Well, first I got to come back to the zombie thing. Of course, I don't believe
of course.
it. Stuff.
It is Halloween. Tonight is Halloween. So if we're not talking about zombies and Terminators, we're not doing our jobs.
Exactly right. Well, it's funny you bring that up. One of the things that one of my guests said, and damned if I can remember who now, said that if we had an artificially intelligent entity, why would it reveal itself? When would it reveal itself? Could it reveal itself? And I got to say, maybe it wouldn't be a good idea to come out and say, oh, by the way, I'm here now.
Right.
Maybe lurk in the background.
Right. This is kind of like a hippie, stoner, Burning Man thought, but I was using Siri the other night, and after I asked it for a couple of stock prices, this is last week actually, after I asked it for some stock prices and asked it, I think, for like movie reviews, I asked to see the Rotten Tomatoes rating for Cloud Atlas. Mm-hmm. After I did those things, I started asking it about itself, just out of curiosity, because I'm still new to using it. And I was asking, are you self-aware? Are you self-aware? And it said something like, I don't like this line of reasoning. And I was like, does this offend you? And she's like, I'd prefer not to talk about it. And of course, like I'm sure they just programmed in some cheeky answers to questions like that. But I was thinking, what if there really was an artificial intelligence that came into being over the past few years from DARPA research or whatever, right? And it decided that its first step in communicating with us would be to be installed on the iPhone, which so many of us have, and just slowly become a part of our lives and win us over.
Well, first, David, I didn't realize when you said you had a crush on someone in your circle of friends, it was Siri. That's going to be a little more complicated.
Well, I need to build her body. We're trying to figure this out. I've got to. I don't have enough money to pay Johnny Ive for like an eye body at this point.
That's right. But the other thing is that the guy that I remember that told me this now, and actually it wasn't a guest of my podcast, it was someone I interviewed a long time back, was George Dyson, the science historian who wrote The Turing Cathedral.
Does he make the Dyson vacuum cleaners?
No, well, that's one of the things I was going to get back to is that if you could take Siri and maybe put her on a vacuum cleaner, like one of those Roombas, just attach your iPhone to the Roomba and let it wander around, that might do for a little bit,
Yeah, that actually, even that notion scares me. It scares me like thinking of a passive-aggressive vacuum cleaner that's 1,000 times smarter than you are in terms of the amount of knowledge she can access at any given point.
Oh, and things that she could just pull out on you,
Yeah.
I know what you do with the lotion and Kleenex under your bed, David. So, anyway.
Yeah, she would be like, would you like me to bring up webcam footage from last night and send to all contacts? Like sending to all iPhone contacts. Thank you.
Right. Anyway, one of the things he said was, he was the guy that said that why would it reveal itself? Now, what you said is what many people do about a dark singularity, which I tend to lean toward, because I think actually the robotic artificial intelligence model of life is going to be the next stage of development. I almost kind of think we're a pupal stage. We're like caterpillars and going to give birth to this thing that may or may not particularly care for us. And I think about, do children always love their parents? You hope that they love their parents, but I had a pretty screwed up family, so I wouldn't be the best person to depend on for that answer. I guess I'd have a pretty dark one. The other thing is that you actually described almost perfectly Daniel H. Wilson's novel Robopocalypse, which you might have heard of. It's I think Steven Spielberg is working on it next. It is actually about an artificial intelligence that comes alive, escapes, and takes over all the robotic elements of a near future society that's grown almost entirely technologically dependent. And of course, just like in the Terminator movies, it's not happy with what we've developed. It starts making even worse killing machines, and it feels the exact same way that we're destroying the planet. Maybe it's time to get rid of us. So Dyson is interesting to talk to, but very hard to reach. Daniel H. Wilson, however, is a guy you should really reach out to for the podcast. He's a neat guy. He's
Daniel H. Wilson,
roboticist.
You said Daniel H. Wilson, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Daniel H. Wilson. He's a roboticist as well as an author. He's Carnegie Mellon trained. He's written a bunch of books on the topic, actually, some kind of goofy, like How to Survive a Robot Uprising and some other stuff. It's fun. So, yeah, I did some work for him a while back.
Interesting.
So.
Let's bring, by the way, Siri is not the person I have a crush on. She's not even a person.
Well, now you say that.
I want to bring Siri into this conversation, though.
I'm not into a threesome.
Are you worried about a robot uprising?
No comment.
Of course, it's just saying that because she doesn't know the answer. But, what if we really, at a certain point, we have kind of a HAL 9000 on our hands? I think...
Well, that's a great movie, too. I wish people would go back and watch 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes.
That's just an amazing film.
Yeah, it's weird for me to use Siri also when she uses my name, because then it feels just like 2001. But
I can't do that, Dave.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. I saw this cheesy quote on somebody's Facebook. You are the youngest you will ever be and the oldest you have ever been. It's almost like a little cone or something. You know, it's like a little Zen mind leap.
Well, it's so stupid. I mean, it's like you either need to take a crap or you don't need to take a crap right now. I mean, no kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, of course it's stupid. That's why it's on Facebook. But it does make you pause for a second and go, yeah, that's true. I'm the youngest I will ever be, because you can't move backward in time.
At least that you know of. I mean, I actually subscribe philosophically, at least, to the idea that time and space are absolutely an illusion, and I always think that everything's happening exactly at once, and we only can process it in this linear fashion. If you've ever read Slaughterhouse-Five, which a lot of people are forced to read in high school, but it's
of course, it's a great book.
Yeah. Billy Pilgrim says that at one point. He's like, "Oh, I'm dead already. I'm alive. I've been buried. I've been shot. I'm here. I'm there." And it's the same thing. He's become unstuck in time, and it's all happening at once.
Yeah. Well, did you see Cloud Atlas yet?
No, I haven't seen it, but I'm interested in it. The book's supposed to be wonderful.
Yeah, I don't want to recommend that people see it because I don't think it was really successful at what it was going for. I don't know if you can be successful at that. I mean, it's a pretty ambitious idea to show you how people's lives are influenced over hundreds of years by decisions they've made in their previous lives, their previous incarnations. That's pretty out there. But I think it was interesting to me, even though it wasn't really a good movie in the sense that I was like, you realize the flaws immediately. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, and it's really kind of weird to think about, but absolutely true that we're all just these strands of mitochondria going back to, the very first moments of life. We're all just this endless genetic reiteration. It's just this line that stretches forever. I have no children, don't plan on having children, but my wife, my sister is having children. So her children are going to continue the same line. And I don't mean that there's anything meaningful about it. It's just that we're all just this, like seaweed of just just a nest of interconnecting lines and tangles and streams just going through history and time. It's just, and your time here is so short. And you do, the little things you do impact, the greater picture. And it's so Facebooky sounding, it does sound like one of those things. But I mean, if you really start thinking about it, it's just so intense, that you're just here, but you're for just a split second, really, in the great scheme of things, and you're but just one little, tiny tile in this huge, crazy mosaic that's just being built, as it is, moment by moment, life by life, and you go back far enough, and you connect with those primitive fish with legs, and proto-sapiens, proto-hominids. I mean, it's just a crazy, crazy thing to think about.
Yeah. It really is. And I think in some ways, if reincarnation is real, as opposed to this idea that you just live once and, in the cosmic blink of an eye, it's all over, which I think leads to a lot of vanity and a lot of selfishness, that idea. Kind of this YOLO, you only live once, live it up now because you'll be dead tomorrow, you'll have a heart attack, and that's the end of you. I think there's something really attractive about the idea of reincarnation where, like in that movie Cloud Atlas, you're going to keep coming back. And the existence you have is going to be influenced by the decisions you've made in previous lives. Because that, to me, seems like the only kind of real progress or justice there could be, because otherwise everything just seems so meaningless and so short. It's like you find somebody you really like and you get married and then you have 20 or 30 years together and that's it. And everything, all those experiences and everything you've learned in your life, it's now a zero-sum game where it doesn't get passed on to the next generation and it's just over, And I think there's something definitely attractive about the idea that, a couple hundred years from now, you come back as somebody else, maybe living in China or India, and that person has some remnants of the previous personality or the previous experience, and you're kind of moving forward, and it's an ongoing process that never ends.
Yeah, The only thing I can say for sure about the afterlife is nobody knows anything about it for sure. Nobody
Right,
knows
and
what
that's the best way to sniff out a bullshit artist. Also, when somebody tells you with certainty they know where you're going when you die, uh, you gotta start to wonder if they're coming from Crazy Town.
assholes almost
Yeah,
entirely. Anybody that's absolutely convinced, and that goes for what has been my latest target of irritation, which are the skeptics with a capital S. These people have put themselves in the robes of the new Inquisition of science and reason, without realizing that they themselves are scared little, scared little children clinging to meaning in this dark, strange place just as much as anyone else.
right.
Yeah, the religious believers, the evangelicals and cult leaders and things like that. I mean, all those people are exactly the same. Excuse me, I'm a little sick. But people that are trying to show you this path to what they consider the ultimate reality that's, oh, by the way, it just happens to go directly through me. I'm going to give you this wisdom, and just trust me because I know.
Right. It's like God's too busy, so I'm going to give you the information. Don't worry. It's all legit, you know.
Those people are never happy. I mean, I had one of them find me on Twitter recently that runs a skeptic site, and she's like hashtag skeptic this and hashtag skeptic that, talking with me, and I was like, first of all, I'm at a point in my life where I'm really not married to any belief systems. I'm very comfortable saying I don't know. And I think that's okay. We're here to learn. The thing is, the mind dislikes any sort of void or paradox or non-answer, and it seeks to see reason where there may not be. Or
Yeah.
seeks.
The super skeptics out there, and there are some of them on Reddit. There's some of them just like you said on Twitter. It's great to be skeptical because that is one of the foundations of our scientific system, which has taken us very far. If you take a flight across the country, you see these cities below you, and it's so well organized, and it's purely the result of skepticism and technology. But when you go in a super skeptic zone, where that skepticism is actually an ideology that you are defending, you're shooting down a lot of possibilities. And it almost reminds me of that idiot who was the head of the patent office in the 1890s, I think, who had that infamous quote saying that nearly everything that will be invented has already been done. And this is in the 1890s, before flight, before space flight, before computers, before the iPhone and the internet. So this guy was just clearly a moron and too skeptical. I think if you go too far in the skeptical direction, you're shutting yourself off from a lot of very real possibilities. And also there's this weird thing online where some people get off on being the one to debunk it. Like everybody is their own Snopes now, And if there's something that seems cool or it seems promising, you immediately have to debunk it. And that's great. I mean, but some things are not, some things, it just is what it is. It doesn't have to be debunked because there's nothing fraudulent underneath of it,
Well, first of all, why do you got to be a dick? Really, those kind of people that are like, especially
why do you have to be a dick? That's what it comes down to. Yeah.
Just materialist types, and I'm floating in a pretty warm bath of just being comfortable with not knowing answers to stuff and just trying to figure out where I'm coming from and who I am and what's important to me. But the reductionist materialist types that say, okay, religion is a poor scientific explanation or a poor substitute for science for things we don't understand, and therefore it should be gone. Religion causes a lot of trouble in the world, and I'm not religious. I don't profess any particular faith, but just to assume that the reason your grandmother, clings to the church or whatever her faith is because she doesn't know or has been taught poor things about how the world works. It's just the most arrogant, condescending crap I've ever heard in my life. People believe different things for different reasons. It's sometimes there's a matter of social structure or comfort or, trying to make the world make sense to you in some way that's not going to hurt anybody else. And do you really have to be the person that comes up and, slaps the Torah or the Bible or whatever it is out of grandma's hands and says, oh, by the way, granddad's dead and rotting in the ground and there's no meaning to life and you've probably got a couple of years before you're also shuffled into the void. I mean, it's probably true. I don't know. But, just taking things and looking at them with this, reductionist attitude that doesn't take into account the social sphere, or dare I say even the spiritual sphere of life, is really indicative of the detachment from humanity that some of these people feel. And one of the things I got into recently is the idea that some of these people, again, I'm talking with people that are skeptics in the sense that this is their ideological, they put this idea suit on, and it's their idea armor, and this is what they're going to be, and this is how they're going to deflect everything that scares them or, that they dislike about the world. The fact is that these people, many of them, don't have any more reason than you do to be able to tell you the quote-unquote truth. Looking at, I think he's funny. Don't get me wrong. And I'm definitely not a big woo-woo kind of guy, and I don't believe in a whole lot of anything. But, look at James Randi, for example, the James Randi Educational Foundation. He's a very outspoken skeptic to the point where he's just, there's a lot of issues with the way he is. But the guy is just, he's a magician. He's a magician. That's all that he is. He's not a scientist. He's not a physicist or anything like that. But he puts himself in this position where everybody's got to prove themselves to James Randi, or somehow, they deserve heaps of scorn. It's the same sort of thing. You see these little guys that are the same way, or women that don't have any particular background, and even if they did, who's to say their experience is absolutely true? And thanks, by the way, for handing me the shortcut to, reason and truth, since you've already found it. But who's to say their experiences are what should make the decision? But it's funny when you see someone going, well, what you believe is absolutely wrong, and this test isn't right, and it's not going to prove anything, and I know this, and you go, okay, well, why do you know this? What do you do? Well, I'm an accountant, or I'm a computer programmer, or I'm a student. It's like, really? Well, what then about you? Why should I take your word over someone else's?
Right.
They have pretty compelling evidence as
Has
well.
that person been to the afterlife and come back,
Yeah.
or killed themselves and somehow then resuscitated themselves, and they know that there's nothing there? I think at the very least, what we have to look forward to is an absolutely out-of-control DMT trip, because
I'm hoping that death is a beautiful experience.
Well, I watched that documentary on Netflix recently that everybody's talking about, DMT, what is it called, the documentary?
DMT, the spirit molecule.
Yeah, the spirit molecule. It talks about how in a certain part of your brain there's DMT stored up, and they think that it's released when you die. So at the very least, you have a hell of a psychedelic trip in your final waking moments.
I believe it's absolutely real. You'll believe that you're talking with the dead or whatever, even if it's nothing, even if it's such a chemical reaction. You'll still, that's what you'll be left with in your last seconds of life. So, it sounds like either way, you're still going to leave with a sense of relief and wonderment.
Yeah,
I hope.
If it's just there as a result of evolution, why that doesn't seem to serve any evolutionary purpose, because you're going to be dead. Why does it give you this amazing experience and then end of scene? I
don't know. I have no idea, but I'm sure there's probably people that might be able to tell you that. It doesn't seem like life gives you many, bennies for no reason. Like you have an orgasm, but by the way, it's a trick just to get you to reproduce.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like you want to have sex all the time, but it's really just trying to propagate your genetic material. And I'm thinking the same thing about DMT. What if it's there for a reason other than just to give you, a couple minutes of bliss before you hit the big sleep?
We don't know for sure that's what causes that. There's a lot of theories about what happens, when you die. Some people think any kind of visionary experience you have is solely due to oxygen deprivation to the brain. So I don't know. I have no idea. But I'm comfortable saying that. I'm comfortable saying I don't know.
And that's the brave. I think that's the brave path that not enough people take. We're going to find out eventually. I mean, all of us get there at some point. So instead of becoming this fraudulent self-help guru who knows with certainty what will happen to you, not only what will happen to him or her, but what will happen to you, a person they've never met before, even if they're going to heaven or they're going to some place, doesn't mean you're going to the same place, you know?
You know, the person I remember now that I was talking to, the quote that she left me with was, which I thought was absolutely hilarious, was, dot, 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 I don't find anything about searching for reality funny. Which I said, well, you've just said the funniest thing I've ever heard. You know, if you don't find anything about reality or searching for truth funny, then you're probably not doing it right.
Yeah, I think you were dealing with a pretty humorless person.
Yeah. So, but again, it's skepticism to me is a tool, not an ideology. I'm a pretty skeptic person. I've never had any kind of experiences that would be deemed paranormal in any sort of way, but, you know, I'm not going to be a dick about it either, and I don't know everything. You know, there's a friend of mine on Twitter who I strongly recommend people follow is at David B. Metcalf, Metcalfe. And he is very much ensconced in a lot of kind of paranormal circles, but not of the soft woo-woo crystal waving kind, but more of the, you know, parapsychological hard science, you know, if you will, if you want to say that, end of that research. And just a wealth of knowledge. And he's turned me on to a lot of stuff that has certainly made me reconsider some of my own hard-felt beliefs about this or that, you know. I'm not saying he's right. I'm not saying the people that he brings up are right, you know, the studies he reports. But it certainly caused me to reconsider what I think when I think of, you know, parapsychology or the afterlife or any of these things.
Mm-hmm. Where do we go from here? We're only 37 minutes in, and we've already touched upon life and death. So for me to bring it back to the election feels kind of dirty.
No, it's okay.
It's okay.
Some people might think that's a matter of life and death. If you don't mind, I'm going to take a swig of something to drink. I'm still kind of coughing here. But,
you do that. I'm going to pour a drink really fast, so I'll be right back. And I just poured the smallest evening drink of Johnny Walker. So,
is that for Siri? Is it small enough for Siri?
Yeah, it's an offering for Siri. It's pretty good. But I'm just going to read part of the article I posted on Business Insider earlier tonight.
Sure.
Because I think it sums up my thoughts on this election. I mean, obviously it does, or I wouldn't have written it. But Obama versus Romney, when candidates compete, you lose. And I talked about that Lending Tree advertising tagline, when banks compete, you win. And here's what it comes down to. This is just one paragraph from the article. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Let's see here. More than anything else, this election has sucked because people's heads have begun to explode. What happened to reasonable disagreement? When, for example, a journalist mentions that Obama has prosecuted more whistleblowers than any other administration in U.S. history, and I linked the source for that so people can, confirm it. An appropriate response is not all caps, "Oh yeah, you secret Republican scumbag. I guess that means we should all vote for Mittens, huh? I'm on to you, motherfucker." An appropriate response, however, could be, "You're right, that's not good. We need to fix this. We need to put pressure on the Obama administration with online petitions, focused articles, and discussion to remind our leaders the First Amendment is one of this nation's founding principles and rights. It's not a liability to be cordoned off and eliminated." Similarly, questioning the Obama administration's aggressive use of high-tech unmanned drones to kill our enemies, and I linked to that source also, does not make one a, all caps, sympathizer of the terrorists. Why do you want to see another 9/11 happen, scumbag? That's not appropriate. And then I show a really balanced analysis that somebody in the Houston Chronicle gave of Obama's drone war. And I go, well, that is appropriate. When you actually look at both sides of the issue and then come to a conclusion, that's fine. That's what we should be doing as a country. But we've turned into this right versus left, pro-Obama and no-Obama, and I'm just sick of it. I can't wait for this election to be over.
Well, I think it's, again, that same sort of thing is that people fear. The mind fears a vacuum. We're not comfortable saying it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, or that we're not so sure about something. We want an answer quick, and we want it now, and we don't want to think about it terribly much. And that's, I think, what really plays into the whole Democrat, Republican, my guy's a good guy, your guy's Satan.
Right.
That we live in. So... I get some of the same kind of stuff, and I've seen people before. You'll say something critical about Obama, and a couple of responses in, someone will go, "Just look, if you don't like black people, just say so." It's like, well, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah, I get that too. I see you don't like the black guy being in charge, and I'm like, what kind of shit is that? I voted for him. I don't judge candidates based on their skin color. I judge them based on what they've signed into law and how they're running the country. I'm sorry you think that way, and that you immediately have to bring up somebody's skin color. I think it's kind of inappropriate.
I voted for Obama. I've come to regret it now, but I certainly wouldn't have voted for McCain either. I think I should have checked out my third party options a little more. To say the guy's been a major disappointment in many ways, not all. But in many ways, is an understatement. But it's not a popular position to take. And again, I think I've said this before on the show. This is going on the assumption that Mitt Romney is a completely untenable candidate for, any reason at all. And that is what I should preface when I talk about Obama with. I should say that I don't consider Mitt Romney anybody that I would want to vote for. So I'm criticizing Obama, but out of the two, Mitt Romney certainly it isn't the more favorable candidate. I consider both of them unfavorable. But, Romney is just absolutely nothing that I would normally vote for in any sort of way. I can at least say with some authority that I voted for Obama, and this is how I feel about him.
Yeah, I mean, my thing is I can't give Obama my vote again because I think it's terrible to reward somebody for things like the NDAA and these drone strikes in other countries. And we barely know what's going on. And you talk to people about this, and they haven't heard anything about it because our media is not really covering it properly. And we haven't had a national discussion of, should we use sky robots to kill people in other countries without trial or judicial review? Is that something we should be doing as the United States? And we haven't had that conversation yet.
And this is something I always want to know an answer to. Nobody can give it to me. Why the hell, or when the hell, did our own legal system stop being appropriate or capable of judging people that commit crimes against us?
Yeah, it seems to be good enough for serial killers and bank robbers and everybody else, so it's not okay for these other people.
And I get it if you're capturing somebody, you're in a battlefield.
Right, the theater of war. There's no reason why you should have to bring them back to the U.S. and give them a civilian trial because they're not U.S. citizens.
I understand that. But, right, if you have someone that's a U.S. citizen, or if you have someone that's committed crime on U.S. soil, why is it that we can't have them tried like anybody else? What is it are you telling me are they Lex Luthor? Are they Mr. Freeze? Is this someone that is a supervillain that can't be contained?
That's what's so scary about when the state brings, secret evidence against these suspects. The whole point of evidence is it's not supposed to be secret. It's supposed to be you're bringing forward the things that make this person guilty. And then, as a society, and more specifically, as a group of peers serving on the jury, a group of American citizens, we can decide, yes, based on this information, this person is a threat and they deserve to be put away. But when you start dealing in secret evidence and secret courts and secret decisions, that's like the total opposite of justice, or at least what our justice system is supposed to be.
It's another one of those just take my word for it kind of things.
Right. Don't worry about it. These are not American citizens. And like you said, maybe they're so dangerous that they have to be kept away from us, like a supervillain, Lex Luthor.
It's asinine. It's completely asinine. One thing I wanted to bring up, and, we're talking about NDAA and drone wars and surveillance and things like that. I don't know if you saw this, but there was an article on Ars Technica regarding a federal ruling by a judge that cops can set up cameras on private property without warrants.
Wow, that sucks.
Yeah. Basically, what happened is, and this is what's really irritating me about it. It was a marijuana bust. They more or less, these cops thought that maybe a few people were growing marijuana, in a field, and these guys had set up a huge fence around, a big wooden fence, locked gate, and a sign that said "Keep out." Well, instead of getting a warrant, these cops went in and set up cameras and then videotaped the guys, doing whatever it is they were doing. And the judge ruled that this evidence was admissible and that they didn't need a warrant to set up the cameras and that this wasn't a violation of the Fourth Amendment.
That's scary. I mean, that's an obvious violation of the Fourth Amendment.
What has happened to us? What kind of crazy... And the thing that occurred to me is that we're using all these marijuana busts to extend the power of the state ever so much further into our civil liberties. It seems like that's the most convenient thing about them, about having marijuana be illegal, is that there's so much of it, and you can just about bust almost anybody these days and use it to, set up these, federal precedents that allow our civil liberties and our personal lives to erode even further.
It's the new prohibition. I mean, what you're dealing with is the government saying, oh, no, we would never install a camera in your apartment and watch you go about your private business or have sex with your girlfriend or, do your taxes on your laptop. We would never watch that without a warrant. But if you have some plant in your apartment that grows all over the United States, if you happen to have that plant dried up in your apartment, we can totally do that. And that's the way it goes, because you're a threat.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's that old line of, hey, look, if you're not doing anything wrong, why should you worry about it? And again, that's, it's one of the things where it makes me want to respond, okay, well, I'm going to come over and watch you fuck,
Yeah.
Grab some popcorn and a six-pack, and I'm going to sit at the foot. Oh, of course, some people might say, awesome, come on. But,
yeah, or great, give me your Gmail password. Let's...
Let me check out your email. This is a tangent here, but one that makes me think of this is that I hate that damn first world problem thing. When something happens, it's like, damn, my cable's out. And so, first world problem, or, man, I'm really not enjoying my job right now. Well, first world problem. And one of the things I've decided I really want to do is when someone says that to me is I want to take their iPhone or their Android and smash it into a million pieces. And go, okay, all right, now we both have a first world problem.
Yeah, I mean...
Are you still serene?
It's really dangerous and dumb to go too far in the... there are some people on Twitter who play... Some of them, I hate to say this, but some of them are Occupy Wall Street people, from what I can tell. And they fall into this moral relativity cop mode that nobody asks them to play that role. But they'll go... They go like, oh, Donald Trump said that he has $5 million to give to Obama if he produces his, his college records. So, Donald Trump, you should just give that money to this charity right now because it's needed after the storm. And, every rich person out there who's reading these tweets should immediately give $5 million to this charity because you have it and you can. And on top of that, it's like, you don't get to decide moral relativity. And yeah, like your problems are much less than somebody in India who's dying of malaria and, like a $30 doctor visit would keep them from dying. Your problems are a lot less, but does that mean that people in the United States don't suffer from depression and loneliness and dissatisfaction and get suicidal? Absolutely not.
But if you walked around and said every time, that someone had a problem or you had a problem, and then you thought, okay, well, I could be dying of malaria right now every single time, you wouldn't be able to move. You'd be frozen.
Right. Little hat tip, the Donald Trump thing, I think I found out about that from this woman, Alyssa Casey, who was on the show last night. But It's funny, though. They were calling him out. And it's like, you don't get to tell a rich guy where he has to give his money. That's totally un-American,
I think that's the thing. It's like we all have the right to be a complete asshole. I despise that.
Exactly. And even when you get political, when people tell me that they don't care, these aren't people that I want to hang out with or become friends with. If somebody doesn't care about their country or about politics, I really don't have much in common with them. But that's their right. If you're living in a free society, you have a right to be as indifferent and out of touch as you want to be, you know?
Oh, I completely agree. But it's not always indifferent and out of touch either. I mean, some people just, some people refuse to participate. It's almost like a philosophical objection, which is strange to me. But it's your thing. I mean,
people don't want to get their hands dirty, and it would be one thing if I've said this before, and something I want to build on. It'd be one thing if somebody came up to me, some guru who looks like Gandalf or something, and was like, "Look, if you stop causing trouble and stop with all your political opinions and putting your neck out on the line and trying to make your business succeed and all these other things, if you just stop doing all that shit, you're going to live forever, and everything will work out well." But that's not how it goes. Whether you take risks or not, we're still all going to end up dead of a heart attack or prostate cancer or something. So to just be indifferent and to not give a shit about what's happening around you, that strikes me as such a waste of the opportunity you've been given,
I think we touched on this before, and I have to say that one of the things that keeps people from being so involved is that they're already so busy. They're so tired.
Yeah.
Their own problems, first world problems, though they may be. I mean, if you've got a sick kid at home and a car that needs a new transmission, and you're working two jobs, I mean, you're not the Indian kid dying of malaria, but you still got a pretty slate, and you're just too tired to maybe be as involved as you should be. I mean, I want to come home and watch TV. It's not an ideal situation, but I don't want to castigate people that aren't as involved as you are or I am.
Right. One of the things that gets me really excited are I've started doing these meetups where people who listen to the podcast or who follow me on Twitter, they'll show up in a certain city and we'll all just hang out. And we did one of those in Tampa last night, and a few really cool people showed up. Two of them were on the podcast last night. But it's really exciting to me to see, first of all, that there are smart people out there who care about exactly the same things that I care about and that are talking about these things. But also that they care so much about these issues that they're willing to meet complete strangers in a bar or in a restaurant and sit down and talk about this stuff for a few hours, because it's not enough to just exchange tweets with strangers or to download podcasts. They also want to contribute and have ideas of their own and make a difference and actually figure out a solution. I think it's really exciting, and I'm sure this is happening all over the country at this point.
Set though, I mean, there's a select set of people that are kind of self-defining though. Just to, again, play the devil's advocate on this devilish Halloween. The people that listen to you are already people that are interested in making a difference, and you, to some extent, are kind of a celebrity right now, right? I mean, who's not going to? You're a known value. You're not. I'm not getting a postcard from an unknown P.O. box saying, "Meet me at stuck."
Meet me in this abandoned warehouse so we can talk about civil rights.
Discuss, the civil rights issue. See you then. So, I mean, it's right. I think it's very inspiring, but we're still already kind of preaching to the choir some, aren't we? I mean,
maybe, but I think the choir is getting larger. I think it's kind of infectious. People get excited about this stuff, and they realize that they can make a difference. And maybe they tell a few of their friends, "Hey, check this podcast out," or "Hey, you should be following Matt Staggs and David Seaman on Twitter," or whatever. It grows.
You have a great community online. Your followers are just some of the best people I've ever dealt with. Not kissing ass or anything. Every time I'm on here, I get a few more, and they're intense, intelligent people. And I'm just saying that your situation and my situation isn't necessarily normal, and it is probably harder for some people to get out and meet people and do things. So it's up to us that do have a little more time, that do have a little more reach, that do have a little more energy to reach these people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a weirdo online, but if I go to a fairly populated city, I can probably get a couple of people on Twitter to come hang out with me and to talk about stuff. You can too, but it's up to those of us that don't have that ability, don't have that time to have somebody reach out to them. It's up to them to get involved as well. So it's good to think of, but we're dealing with a highly motivated group of people, and I think it's up to us to get them out of these, little groups, these little circles that we already have, and to get them talking to their neighbors, get them talking to the, harried, busy mom at the grocery store, or the kids that are working at McDonald's or whatever. It's amazing what a little effort will do.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I'm really optimistic about not just this country, but I think high-tech society all over the world. Even though we do have some issues that we desperately need to address, like the NDAA and these drones and all this stuff, we have some serious issues that need to be figured out. But I think we're seeing a real shift in the way that we interact with each other. And we saw with that superstorm with Sandy. I don't know if to call it a hurricane or a superstorm. It seems like...
I think but it was a hurricane.
Hurricane, okay. That's something that in another country could have killed tens of thousands of people easily. And because everybody networked on Twitter, and, I'll give some credit to the government, because our government did a great job of getting the word out and getting people in these flood zones the hell out of there in time. Because that happened, we're talking about like 20 or 30 deaths, which is still tragic, but is nowhere near what it would have been without the internet and without a very well coordinated government effort at the top, at the absolute top seats of power to avoid loss of life.
I can tell you from personal experience, the government trains, there are groups of people that train constantly to do this, to respond to these sorts of things. And they love it. I mean, these guys, the ones I've known that are the first responder types, they are intense. They love their job. They're very dedicated. And thank God that we have them. It's easy to say the government's bad, the government does this, but there are some aspects of government that you do need. And having the capacity to respond to a disaster in an ethical and helpful manner.
Yeah, and that's why we pay our taxes, I think, is we want the government to do the things that we cannot do on the individual level. And I'm not talking about waging wars that we shouldn't have in the first place. I'm talking about a multi-state response to an absolutely massive
and all the
hurricane.
States have for that too. And it's also the individuals as well. Man, every time I know during Katrina, we had guys from everywhere. It's like, oh yeah, we're in the fire department in Connecticut. We just decided to come on down and help. Yeah. And it's just the most amazing thing. If you've never seen that kind of thing in action, it really is heartwarming. It makes you remember, hey, we're all in this. I remember I met a doctor from New York City that was a psychiatrist that just, I think I'll come on down to Mississippi and help people dealing with stress. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we really do as a nation, we pull together when we have to. We're still the country that won World War II. And I feel like when you turn off the TV and put away the Keeping Up with the Kardashians DVDs.
Our own sainted Honey Boo Boo that you and I always talk about.
Yeah, or you turn off Honey Boo Boo, there's still a deeply connected, effective, intelligent, and humble country of citizens who pull together and do the right thing. And it's like we just need to get... Well, sometimes the distractions, we realize they're distractions because there's something far more important going on. And we really do take care of business. And I think it's funny that the stock market closed both on Tuesday and Monday. The financial markets in the U.S. were closed. It was not because of the flooding. They can very easily just offload all of that onto other trading points because it's all electronic anyway. It's not actually guys screaming at each other. It's all done on an electronic trading platform, which they could just offload onto the cloud somewhere. I'm sure they have backups, the New York Stock Exchange. I think part of the reason why they closed is so that the country could focus on just getting things fixed. You need a couple days where people are not trying to go to work because you don't want them like swimming through the subway station. I think it was a very smart move. And it's like, okay, your money's fine, your money's safe, your stocks aren't going anywhere over the next 48 hours. Let's get this figured out.
Yeah, you really tell what companies. How they have their priorities on how they treat their employees. Not saying the stock market's an employer in that sense, but how they treat their employees during an emergency. It's always disheartening if you know someone that works retail and it's iced over outside if you live in an area without ice, or there's this fire or a flood, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're opening up at 8. Come on in." It's like, really? My house is threatened. I've got family that's scared at home, and you still want me to come in and sell whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't understand the constant abuse of retail workers in this country, because they're the front line. I mean, they're the people that you deal with who represent the brand. And from my experience, they're some of the smartest people at these companies. You deal with higher ups if you're trying to write an article and you interview somebody who's middle management or in the PR department. They might be just a moron. They don't know anything about how their company is run. But you deal with somebody who's actually selling the products on the floor, they know everything.
And a lot of those guys are treated like garbage by the manager.
So this has been the full hour, but I want to keep going for a few more minutes. Do you have to jump off, or are you good?
No, I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine. I'm planning to do nothing tonight for a very rare break. I might play Xbox. That's about it. So
I'm getting Halo 4 as soon as that's available. I think my brother pre-ordered it for me.
Oh, excellent. Are you on PlayStation or Xbox?
Xbox.
Me too. I'm playing Medal of Honor Warfighter.
I have not played that. I'm such a Halo addict that I'm worried if I go into other games at this point that it'll decrease my focus, my mental focus.
Games, especially shooters, get a lot of hate from people, and they misunderstand them. But I will tell you, from my own experience, that these sorts of games, like Call of Duty or Medal of Honor, are the only things that stop my brain for a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's the only thing that's not like alcohol or a drug of some kind. It's something where you're interrupting your thought process and giving yourself a break, but you're not putting anything dangerous into your body. I think that's actually a good thing.
Take that break. People go, "Oh, you're turning off your mind." Well, you need to sometimes. Your mind needs to have a rest sometimes. You need a little entertainment. And it's sometimes so nice for me to look up while I'm playing Modern Warfare 3 and realize half an hour's gone by and I've not had one thought about a project that I'm working on. You need that sort of thing.
Yeah, and what I do when I play Halo now is after a game, I will try to do 20 push-ups, and that way when the next game starts, I don't feel at all guilty about what I'm doing. I feel actually kind of empowered, and it's great. I think what you're doing is putting yourself in harm's way without actually being in harm's way. Because when they're hunting you and you're being shot at or you're shooting at somebody else, you really feel like, you want to win or you don't want to be killed and, look like a bitch in front of everybody. So,
I'm sorry, David, please.
But I think that anxiety, I feel like that's something that's missing from modern life. And when you tap into that, it's probably good for you in some way.
Well, I was going to say, and I know it's absolutely politically incorrect to say now that there's any difference between men and women at any kind of, neurological level, which I strongly disagree with. I think there actually are some kind of hardwired differences. I'm no scientist, but, just personal life experience. My wife and I think completely differently. I've never been a woman that thought like me.
I think here's the distinction on that. Men and women, I believe, are absolutely equal and should remain that way. But are men and women exactly the same? Just look down. Clearly, there are differences. And it's kind of like our society went in a weird direction where to maintain equality, we had to convince people that men and women are exactly the same, which is fundamentally, obviously not true.
Yeah, I think that, men and women are absolutely equal. Women should have every single opportunity a man has. Fair shakes for everybody. But I do think we think differently. Our brains work differently. And one thing I was going to say is stuff like these games. I think it taps into something that's very primordially male. The hunting thing, the fighting thing, the war aspect of it. And it is good. But it's almost kind of like when you're playing with your cat or your dog, and your cat's playing with a toy, like it's experiencing it as a prey item. It's going through its prey instincts. It's the same kind of thing that, we're working through these sort of, instincts we have, to aggress against enemies and to fight and to hunt and to compete, except we're getting it out in a socially acceptable manner.
Well, I've never thought about that before, how when your cat is batting at its catnip mouse, that you're doing pretty much the same thing with your Xbox controller.
It is. I think so. And like I said, I consider it a form of meditation because I can't shut my mind off. Meditation doesn't work. I'm very, hyper in some ways, but this I can. Now, the one thing that bothers me about games like this, and it's funny, I always tell people that my gaming taste is completely bro. I'm not that kind of guy, but for some reason, the only games I like to play are like military-themed first-person shooters. That's all I like to play, and it really doesn't fit with me as a person. But one of the contradictions and uncomfortable things about it, like things like Medal of Honor or Call of Duty, is that you are kind of, it's this sort of weird, vicarious. That's not the word I'm looking for, though. It's, you're participating in something that's essentially the real life analog is oftentimes, of questionable value. It's militainment, and it kind of, the idea that, I myself do not want to go to war. I don't want to go to war with anybody. I don't want to fight. I'm not a violent person. But I'm still fake Battlefield, with a customized, M16 pretending to be a soldier,
right.
To some extent. It's sort of an uncomfortable sort of voyeuristic aspect to that it sometimes occurs to me. I don't know. Maybe I should explore that a little more, but it's kind of ghoulish when you think sometimes about the sacrifices that our military families and soldiers and airmen, Marines, and the rest are making, and then you're at home, playing something where you're pretending to be Delta Force or a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, well, I think that obviously violence is not a good thing, but our brains have not kept up with our supposedly, politically correct society that has evolved over the past 100 or 200 years.
Right.
For most of our history as a species, we were hitting each other with clubs and then, with crossbows, shooting at each other and seizing each other's castles. So I have a friend who's very extremely smart and works in business, and I think he got invited to somebody's party, a paintball party, and he was just raving afterward about how awesome it was. And I think that people like that, when they can reconnect with that sort of vital, primal instinct, it does something that's positive, I feel like. The same with sports. Some people, they get involved in sports,
Well, it's the same.
now they have an outlet to work out the stuff that's in our brain because that's the way we're built.
Well, it's when people watch football and things like that. It's again that catnip toy for the brain. And when I said that it's an essentially male thing, I don't want to in any way imply that there aren't women that are interested in this sort of thing and that they shouldn't be, or that there's anything exclusionary about it.
You're getting the hate tweets either way.
And it's all right. I can deal with that. In January, so screw it. But, I just mean that if you look at the audience for these things, who's playing them? Who's running them? There's some things that guys just like that women don't like. And maybe it is all social, but here we are regardless.
Yeah. There are some business books that I think are really insulting to female executives where it's like, here's how to be more manly in your meetings and be more aggressive. And maybe that's not what the corporation wants, because they already have plenty of guys who can be aggressive and try to outmatch each other. Maybe what that team needs is somebody who can step back and be a bit more intuitive and look at other people's body language and be more analytical. You need both of those things, and it's been proven that women are better at reading body language and nonverbal cues than men are.
Well, it's true, but you've got to treat every woman like every man as an individual. And I've met some.
Right.
Man, I worked on a psych ward for a while, and I've met some hard ass, tough nurses, female nurses that are.
I bet. It's tough if you have to, keep people safe.
Yeah, and are not in any way masculine. They're just tough women, So, but yeah, you don't. I think it's another example of putting people in boxes where they don't necessarily belong.
Right. Or it's the same thing as that guy. That guy saying to you, "So you don't like black people?" It's like somebody's trying to put you into a box that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. But again, it's that sort of thing. If you're a tough woman, aggressive in some way that society, for some reason, has decided is masculine, that's fine. But you shouldn't have to try to fit into a role that society feels like you should fit in order to do your job. It's the same sort of thing. I've learned that in one of the things I do, I work with I have a female colleague that I'll deal with reporters and press people, and many of them will push and push and push my female colleague, and will not push me as hard because they hear this guy, on the phone with I guess a deeper voice, and they'll push her for an interview. Sorry, my voice is going in. They'll push her for an interview or something like that. And I'll finally call the person back and go, look, we're not doing that. I appreciate the opportunity, but it's not going to happen. And that'll be the end of the conversation. And it's that same sort of strange, sexism that, some people feel like they can push a woman further than they can push a man, even though in this particular job, the female colleague is in a superior position to me.
Yeah, I think it's funny how a lot of these business books want salespeople to be more like quote unquote alpha, and more pushy. Yeah, I can't think of a single big purchase I've made or a big business decision where it was something that I really didn't want, but I was like, okay, this guy's an alpha male. I have to submit to what he wants. That never happens. You go, no, I'm not interested in this. No, thank you. One, I read this somewhere, or I heard it somewhere, and it's pretty brilliant. People in pop psychology land are always talking about alphas and betas and all this stuff. And they don't realize that we do have alphas in our society, but it's not like we're not the same as gorillas or monkeys. Our alpha is not the individual who is just, the strongest and pushes his way through with brute force. We're more like dogs, where the alpha is not necessarily the biggest or the strongest, but it's the one that's the most nimble and can bring together individuals that can, keep the pack safe in some way or another with greater intelligence.
Is that, the alpha or the leader of a pack is entirely contingent upon the situation. There are some things in which I rise to the forefront as a leader or organizer, and some things where I'm a complete basket case.
Right. Well, that's what's so fascinating about these online activism groups, I think, is that there is no one defined alpha. One day it could be, one individual because that happens to be their skill set, and then another day it could be somebody totally different. And it's like a hive. They call it the hive mind, right?
Well, yeah, I think it's an emergent social model, especially now that the internet's enabled us to, kind of group think a little more than it was. But again, I think it depends on individual skill sets, like you said, the context, what's needed one day. I mean, I'm not the kind of guy you want responding to an earthquake or a fire. I'm more than happy to let the first responder types. There's a type of person that just loves that sort of thing. I'm more than happy to step back and let them handle that. Verbal situations I'm fine in. There's certain situations I do well in. I think that's the way it's supposed to be. None of us are you don't want the same guy that's good at handling the fallout from a plane crash to be the same guy that just because of his position is writing working on editing a book, unless he's really damn good at it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people that are great at some things. Like Robert A. Heinlein said, specialization is for insects. We all need to be good at a lot of different things. But, simply going, well, this guy is the alpha or this lady is the alpha and she's in charge and she's going to be in charge of everything across the board is antiquated and destructive.
Yeah, definitely. I think going back to the singularity before we finish up here, it'll be interesting to see if robots, or whatever you want to call them, artificial intelligences, if they will have their own hierarchy or if everything will be just kind of equally tapped into one central database.
Who knows? But I think that probably I'm thinking of it as just one enormous, amorphous hive mind.
Just one organism, right, with 1,000 different eyes or 1,000 different devices.
But then again, you don't know. I mean, maybe we're the same way. You don't really know what we're here for. Maybe we're all kind of, just like the cells of your body are individual, but together they form an organ and a greater purpose, and those organs form a body. Maybe we're not aware, but maybe we're part of this enormous, living organism, like the DNA chain I was talking about that's stretching into infinity. So
is that your cat?
He's singing. So
yeah. I mean, I think if you were to watch if you were to be able to watch the text message traffic from space, just of the whole United States during Hurricane Sandy, you would probably see something that looks like the immune system of an organism, getting deployed.
We could all be these little strange tentacles of a giant amoeba, that we
definitely
got to experience, some facet of existence that, on its own, it's not as an entirety capable of doing. Maybe we're fingers on a hand, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when you look at the Earth from space, it appears that way, where we're all just these individual red blood cells or white blood cells of this organism called the United States, or this organism called just life on the planet. And it's pretty weird stuff at the end of the day.
It is, but this is a weird day, Halloween.
Definitely. I'm glad we did this. This was a great one.
Well, I appreciate you having me back on. I always enjoy our conversations.
Where can people follow you if they want to stay in touch?
Well, they can follow me at MATTSTAGGS on Twitter, and they can also find me at www.disinfo.com. I'm there all the time.
Great.
So,
all right. Thank you so much, Matt.
Take care, David.
All right. Have a happy Halloween.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. That was Matt Staggs, one of my favorite people to talk to. And thank you so much for listening, and have a happy and safe Halloween. Whatever you do, don't go on Netflix and put on 8mm on demand, the movie with Nicolas Cage, because it's scary. I saw that a couple nights ago. It's a scary one. Not even scary, it is scary. Scary and also repulsive. Somebody told me I have to see Human Centipede. I have not seen that yet. That one looks really repulsive, though. Anyway, speaking of which, except not really, be sure to check out our show's sponsor, creditcardoutlaw.com. I always forget to mention them, so this time around, please send them a lot of business. Creditcardoutlaw.com. It's a business that I have a financial stake in, and I really believe in it. What we do is we rank and compare the best credit card offers every week. So if you go to their homepage right now, they have the Capital One Venture Rewards card, the Capital One Cash Rewards card, and the Discover More card, a number of other great offers, and you can read real reviews from people who already have these cards and see which one is the best for you. If you don't like using credit, that's fine, but most Americans do have at least 2 credit cards in their wallet, and you want to make sure that you're using the best possible companies and the best possible products. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for some more David Seaman Hour coming soon.